Well, welcome back to another episode of Chalkbowl Conversations. And today we are joined by the awesome Courtney McGregor. Hello, Courtney.
Hi.
Courtney, for those of you who don't know, well, firstly, you must have your head buried in the sand. But secondly, Courtney was a pack rim medalist, a World Cup medalist, I think, right? Correct me if I get this wrong, Courtney. You went to Com Games, World Champs. You had a college scholarship at Boise State and a career high of making it to the Rio Olympic Games. Have I missed anything out?
No, I wasn't a World Cup medalist, sadly, but I've been in quite a few finals, so
Oh, I was a vault
yeah.
finalist. That's right. That was Doha, wasn't it?
Yeah, Doha and Portugal and yeah, Doha a couple of times, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Ah, still very impressive anyway. So, hey, thanks for
Thanks.
joining us today. I really appreciate it. We've been having a few conversations with some of our New Zealand gymnasts of note, and they've been really interesting actually, just digging a little bit deeper and seeing what's going on for them and their perspectives. And I'm looking forward to having a chat with you today um, about what's been happening for you. But look, why don't you just give us a little bit of a rundown of what's happened since Rio for you? Because I guess you finished Rio in 2016, and then did you still have more college to do, or did you come straight back?
So I was finished with my schooling. I finished a year early because when I went from my normal high school to correspondence, I skipped a year because it was year 10, and I was like, I'll just start NCAA. So then I ended up finishing a year early, which was really nice. So the sort of 8 months leading up to the Olympics was just gym. And I did go over to Boise State a couple of months early. So in about May, I went over there. The Olympics were in August because my coach, Mary Wright, at the time was living in Texas and she was flying over to Christchurch every like couple of weeks to coach. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, it'll just be a lot easier if I go get myself settled up there and she can come up and coach me there. It's a lot, lot less of a journey for her. So I went to Rio and then I went straight back to uni and then started uni. And then I was there for 4 years, kind of doing some senior international stuff on and off. I went to a couple of world champs during my time at college. And then 2020, March of 2020 was crazy for me, like it was for everyone. But in January, I actually tore my Achilles. And so I was just kind of coming back from surgery, doing conditioning and all that sort of stuff. And then the pandemic kind of rolled around, and the New Zealand government said, like, get home before we shut the borders. So I kind of fled the States, and literally, like, the span of 2 days, I had to pack up all my stuff. And at that point, I kind of thought I'd probably be going back since I had that extra year of what they call eligibility, since I got injured right before the season. But then when I got back over here and kind of seeing how things were unfolding on over in the States, I thought, oh, I think I might stay here. And then I was kind of tossing up whether or not to do gym here, but I didn't really feel like I had the support to do it with uni and with work and all of that stuff. So it kind of all just came to an end
Yeah.
gradually though, because I was injured and
Yeah.
then I was just conditioning and then yeah, things kind of wrapped up. So it was nice. It was kind of a gradual exit. But yeah, so now I'm doing some post grad study and then hoping to be a med student next year.
Wow. What were you studying at Boise?
I did a Bachelor of Science in Health Science and Psychology.
Yeah. And so when you came back to New Zealand, were you doing papers online for Boise, or had you transferred to New Zealand papers at that stage?
So the academic year over there finishes in about May. So I came back in March 2020, and then I was still doing classes through to May. So pretty much in lockdown the whole time. And then we had an online graduation, but it was in like the middle of the night, so I didn't even watch it. And then I was done with that. So then I spent sort of the rest of 2020 coaching and
Hmm.
working, and then started Feb 2021 doing some stuff here.
Yeah, yeah. So when you made the decision to kind of call it quits, I'm done. Um, maybe can you just sort of talk a little bit about how you came to that decision. I mean, it seems like there was a bit of an arc that you were following in terms of, finishing up at Boise and then coming back and COVID and all that sort of stuff. But at some point, you would have had to have made a decision: do I want to continue in the sport, or do I want to call it a day? So, yeah, how did you come to that decision?
Yeah, it was definitely a really hard process. I think I was leaning towards go back and keep going.
Wow,
But my family kind of talked me out of going back to the
that's
States, which
funny.
fair enough. Yeah, which was, yeah, I definitely made the right decision. But at the time it was hard because we didn't even know if they were going to have another season. They did have a season last year, but there was lots of restrictions and everything. So it was kind of like, oh, do I want to go back for that kind of not full experience? Or do I want to stay here? And for me, staying here, I kind of knew that I would rather just move on and sort of start fresh rather than continuing gym, just because I live like 45 minutes away from the gym. Like I'm an adult now, I need to start working and making my own money. And so I've always been able to balance gym and school and like a tiny bit of social life, but trying to balance like gym, school, work, and just balancing out your social life and that sort of stuff. Like I was like, no, that's not going to work. And it
Yeah,
was so awesome in the States because we had like the gym was on the campus at the university. So I was living right next to the university. I'd like go to class, just walk over to gym. We had like our own team physio. We had all of that stuff. Um, Whereas like in New Zealand, it's all totally you're self-funded, you're on your own, that sort of stuff. So it was like all of that stuff kind of came into my
yeah,
brain, and I was like, yeah, no, I think we're gonna be done.
yeah. Basically, you would have to drive a lot more.
Yeah, well, not even just the driving, just like takes because I did all that driving when I was younger
Yeah,
over there, but it's just that there's not enough hours in the day to get
yeah.
all of that stuff done. And a lot of people think I think it was because of my injury, but I was actually really excited to kind of come back from injury. I kind
Mm,
of like that challenge of like coming back, and with an Achilles, like once it's repaired, it's stronger than it was before. So I wasn't
yeah,
necessarily worried about any of that. But yeah, just sort of all the all the other stuff.
yeah. So potentially, I mean, it sounds to me like potentially um, you were maybe coming to the end of your time as a competitive athlete anyway, but they just kind of brought it forwards a little bit sooner. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. I think if I had stayed on, it would have only been, trying to make it to 2020, and then I
Yeah,
would have moved on after that anyway. But yeah, at the time it was all up in the air, like, is the Olympics going to happen? Like, are there
yeah,
even going to be any more trials? So I was kind of like, yeah, don't want to invest, 30 hours a week into this for another year and then find out, the trials aren't even happening and all that stuff. So yeah, it was a tough decision, but I think it was the right one for me.
yeah. I'm curious to know, like a lot of gymnasts find that transition from being a competitive athlete and, having your life so centered around the sport into normal life, a difficult transition because it's, where you've grown up and where a lot of your friends and contacts are, and I'm curious to know what your experience has been. I mean, it's still relatively early days in the scheme of things,
Mhm.
but still, like, how has it been for you transitioning from being an athlete to just being Courtney McGregor, normal person?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely been really interesting. I think luckily I'm always been someone that's had the perspective of like gym is just a sport. I don't like identify myself as just purely a gymnast and nothing else. So that definitely helped me. But in saying that, you still, gym takes up all of your time, and
Yeah.
it just is just so like all consuming that when you leave, it's so strange. And I think sort of just having to let like your body adjust. I don't know if the human body is made to like do gymnastics 30 hours a week, but once you stop doing that, your body changes, and you kind of have to be kind to yourself with that stuff. And then um, you have more time to do things that you didn't have time to do before, which is awesome. I think talking to friends who like have been through it before, that helps too.
Mm,
And I don't know, I guess in a couple of months you just kind of adjust, and then you're wondering, how did I have so much time before to fit in gym? Because when you sort of transition into like your normal civilian life, you're like, whoa, like it's so weird. But
Yeah.
I think like a whole another world kind of opens up when you stop spending so much time at the gym and you realize like gym was an important part of my life, but it's just, a small chapter in the scheme of things.
Yeah. You mentioned as you were speaking there that you recognised quite early on that gymnastics was just something that you did. It wasn't who you were, and it's not where you get your sense of self-worth necessarily. I know that is something like Dylan actually mentioned it in the interview I had with him previously, as an important thing for, I guess, young people to be aware of, because you do get so much affirmation from being good at something, right? So if you're good at the sport, there's this kind of trap that you can fall into as a young person, that your sense of identity and well-being and purpose is all wrapped up into this one sport. I wonder, what for you, was that something that you kind of like, maybe your parents talked to you about, or you just kind of had like you saw it happening in other kids, or is it, maybe can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think like when I was super young, probably like 6, 7, 8, like when we would do all the things at school and be like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would
Yeah.
say Olympic gymnast, thinking like that was a job. And then I think like as I kind of got older, I was like, wait, that's
How
not a
wrong you
job.
were.
Yeah, that's not a job at all. So I made sure that I was kind of like investing in obviously in school, but kind of trying to figure out things that I liked and that interested me. And I know there's a lot nowadays about balance is better, and we're always talking about that at our gym too. And it's great if you can do a variety of sports growing up, but I think when you get to that sort of like 12, 13 time, especially in gym, when you're 12 or 13 years old, it just takes up so much of your time that it can be really hard to be involved in other sports. But I think it's great if kids can have other interests and other hobbies.
Yeah.
So not necessarily balance in terms of sport, but balance between like sport and other aspects of life that they enjoy. So when gym comes to an end, like it inevitably will, then you have like other interests to pursue, and whether that's academically or
Mm. And I think it's probably quite an important message for, for parents and coaches to be aware of, that um, there there's certainly benefits from focusing on one thing in terms of the outcomes that you can get, but if you look at the full life of a young person involved in sport, it's really important that they have opportunities to access other interests and time to do that, which is obviously the biggest challenge in a sport, is time consuming as gym, eh?
yeah, definitely. It takes up so much of your time, which is great because you meet so many amazing people, and all of my best friends are from gym, and yeah, it's great. But then you have to realize that it's not going to necessarily last forever. So good to have some other interests too.
Yeah, totally. um my next question is kind of stepping back a little bit to your time when you're in the sport. um an observation, I guess, that I've made is that gymnasts and coaches, parents, everybody can get really caught up in short-term outcomes. Like the competition season rolls around, and inevitably everyone's thinking about, have I got my skills, and am I going to make it into the team, and or am I going to be ready for the first competition, and all those sorts of things. And there can be this kind of I guess, a trap, really, that people fall into, that they only think about the thing that they need to do immediately, rather than thinking about their involvement in the sport over a longer period of time, and thinking about, okay, well, I want to be doing the sport for a long period of time, because I love it and I want to continue to do it. What's the right decision now, to um, I guess, meet that balance between the short-term goals, but also looking ahead to the future. And I just wonder if you've had an experience where you've felt like the short-term priority was really hammered into you, and 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 what impact that had on you, and maybe if there was an alternative situation where somebody took a longer view, and how that played out.
Yeah, I've definitely had my like wide range of coaching and coaching strategies. So I've had like a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Um, I think it does depend on the kid too. So for me, like I wasn't a huge goal setter. Like I wouldn't write down my own goals. I kind of had them in my brain, but I didn't really let them control me. I think my coaches were always setting goals, but they weren't necessarily communicated as goals. They would be like, you know, you need to get this skill, or like you're learning this because we need it in your routine, or like we want you to go to this competition. But for me, like long-term goals really intimidated me. So
Hmm.
I wasn't like waking up every day and being like, I'm going to make it to the Olympics. Because for me, that was like, like, I don't want to be thinking about that. I don't want that to motivate me. I want to have other things motivate me. So I've always been really internally motivated, kind of just doing it because I enjoy it, or because I wanted to get the skill, or I wanted to, you know, do those things. That was my motivation. So I set more short-term goals, but not like outcome-based goals. So I
Hmm.
would call them probably intentions rather than goals,
Yeah.
because they were just sort of like daily things that I would think about. So I think it's really easy when you're like just in the gym so many hours to just kind of go on like autopilot and not have much intention in what you're doing. And so for me, I would set little intentions like, okay, maybe today on beam, I'm gonna fight to stay on in every skill, or on bar, I'm gonna focus on my handstands today, or like floor, I'm gonna just fight for my landings today. So for me, I liked setting like super minute like intentions
Yeah.
daily to kind of like keep me going, rather than thinking about outcomes like I want to come this place at this competition,
Yeah.
all of that stuff. You don't really have control over a lot of that anyway. You know, you don't have control over what other people are doing or what the judges are seeing. You know, it's really subjective. So you just have to worry about the things that you can control.
Mm, mm. I wonder if you've got some advice, because I think often, particularly young athletes, maybe, but from a maturity point of view, don't feel like they can sort of speak up and say, "No, adult, I'm not going to focus on that goal. I'm going to focus on my intentions."
Yeah.
Like there's a little bit of give and take, I guess, because goals can be
Mhm.
useful in terms of having little milestones to work towards. I wonder if you
Yeah.
have kind of some advice for a young person who maybe is in a goal setting process, but to help them, I guess, not become so focused on the outcomes, um, and to be able to recognize that actually it's you know um, your intentions towards that outcome that really make a difference.
Yeah. I think the first thing I would ask them is, why are they doing gymnastics? Because
Yeah,
I think for a lot of kids, they'll say, "Oh, because I want to win all the medals, or they want to, you know,
yeah.
be a national champion." And like that stuff is great, but I don't think that's gonna be enough to like get you out of bed in the morning when you have training at
Yeah.
7 a.m. So you got to be doing it because you enjoy it. And for me, I think like a big motivation, probably, you know, since like the age of like 11 or 12, was just like hanging out with my mates, and like
Mm.
all the like my friends were at gym, and so we would just have the best time together, like even if it was really really hard, or like we were doing scary skills or like routines and they were exhausting. Like I
Yeah.
feel like that sort of suffering like bonded us together, and we were so close. We
Yeah.
like had so much fun, like even when things were like so scary, or like someone was doing a new skill and you knew they were like absolutely terrified, we're
Mm.
just like, there was so much humor. Someone would be like, okay, well, what like colors do you want at your funeral? And they would be like, oh, I'll have like
That's awesome.
blue and purple. And you'd be like, okay, like I got you, like you'll be good. Like we have it all covered. Like we had so much fun every day, even though we were working really hard. And I don't think those things have to be mutually exclusive. Like you can have
Mm.
fun and work really hard too. And that's kind of where most of my enjoyment came from, not competing. Like I didn't even really like competing at all. Like for me,
Yeah.
I was the person that liked training way more than competing.
Um, you mentioned about being a bit daunted by long-term goal setting, and it reminded me, back when I was coaching a bit more, I sat down for a goal setting session with a group of teenage boys. They were 13, 14, 15, and we hadn't really done any long-term goal setting. We'd only ever done sort of short-term targets, sort of term by term, because
Yeah.
it's about as much focus as I could get out of them.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, well, let's have a conversation about where this might be heading. And so we did the goal setting process, and then about a week later, one of the boys came back to me and said, "So we did that long term goal setting, and I've decided that I don't want to do gymnastics."
Oh my god.
I
No.
think he just looked at the different options for him. He's like, well, I could go, this sort of performance route, or I could just do it socially and just have fun. Neither of them really appeal. I just kind of like coming day by day, and I think that'll probably run out. So I'm going to be done by the end of this term. So it kind of backfired a little bit.
Yeah, I think long-term goals can be so overwhelming, especially I think when you're in like that high performance environment when you know like every day is so hard and then you're kind of
Yeah,
setting goals for like 2 or 3 years down the road and you're like,
yeah,
oh, it's gonna be so rough. Like
yeah,
so much work's got to go into it. So yeah, I think it's good to have like an idea of where you want to go long term, but not necessarily like such concrete goals like you would
yeah.
need like in the short term.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good lesson for coaches. I know I would have benefited from that conversation, or this conversation, more when I was a younger coach. That I think as a coach, you look at the plan. You look at you map out the potential for an athlete, and you're a lot more conscious of the time constraints that you have to achieve certain things. And so you're
Yeah.
really focused on those milestones. But I think, from an athlete's perspective, what I'm hearing you say is that actually um, those things are fine in the background, but actually the day to day is more important. How are we making this training session fun? Um, how am I taking ownership for my training? Thinking more about purpose and that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's hard when you're a younger gymnast too. I think a lot of younger gymnasts, well, I know I was, were just kind of like robots. Like we just got told what to do and we were like, yeah, we'll do that. But I think when you get a little bit older and you kind of feel like you can have a bit more say in your training, a bit more ownership over it, that definitely helps too because when you get say in something, you're a lot more motivated to actually carry out the plan rather than just someone else setting the goals for you and you're kind of like, well, I don't know if that's actually what I want. So it's good to have some input in like the goals and even like the day-to-day training stuff.
You mentioned a little bit earlier about your teammates and how important it was to, um, I guess, to have those conversations while you're suffering through all the hard yards that you have to do in gymnastics. Um, I wonder if you can talk to, I guess, the importance of team in a gymnastics setting, which is, viewed as an individual sport, but actually, particularly in the training setting, a sense of team can really add value. Um, yeah, maybe just talk through some of your experiences around team.
Yeah, definitely. I think the team aspect is so important, even though it is, as you say, an individual sport. I think the teams I was on, like we were always really loud, like we loved cheering for each other, cheering each other on, like creating a really good atmosphere. Um, because it just makes everything so much more enjoyable. And if you're in the gym for like 32 hours a week, like who wants to be miserable? So you can do the work and be all quiet and sad because it's really hard, but or you can cheer each other on, and that helps so much. I think what I see these days with like some of the kids I coach is they're just like super competitive with each other,
Mm,
and it sometimes even comes across with like parents being competitive between each other and stuff too. And I think that's just so opposite to what it was like when I was in gym. Obviously, having some healthy competition is great, because it pushes everyone to get better. But I don't think it needs to be like such explicit competition. Like it was always internally, I was like, oh, she just got that skill, so now I want to get it. But I was never like, I'm gonna beat you, like I'm gonna get the skill. It was just like everybody uses it as internal motivation, but it's not necessarily something that needs to be like spoken about. And I think, when you're competing with these people that you're so close with, like sometimes it's going to be their day, sometimes it'll be your day, and it's like it's just the way it is. So yeah, I think you have to have really close bonds with your teammates. I don't think there needs to be a whole lot of emphasis on the competitive side of things.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose an observation that I've made over the years is that you see the benefits of team, a healthy team dynamic and training, particularly in the competition setting, because when you're out there by yourself, it's pretty lonely and pretty scary, particularly if you're on the world stage and you're not only on a beam, you're on a podium or on a beam on a podium, and you've
Yeah.
got everybody looking at you. Like in that competitive setting, there's a lot of weight that athletes carry in individual sports, particularly like gymnastics. And I definitely think if you know that your teammates have got your back, that if it doesn't go well, your team and your coach has got your back when you come down from the competition, whether you've done well or haven't. It's like a crash pad, right? It's a safe place to kind of fall back to and have a little cry and then move on.
Yeah, definitely. That's so funny that you mentioned that, because that was something I noticed. Like I always had a great team kind of going up until like about a year or so out from the Olympics, and then people started to, move on or do other things, and then we ended up, it was like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it was just me left, and so I was training by myself,
Yeah,
and I was like, oh, this is so miserable. And then even like at competitions, like at the test event and at the Olympics, like you're up on the beam and you're like, this is so scary, like I'm just all alone up here. And then when I went to college and I had like a whole team and it was
yeah,
like a team competition, I'm like on the beam and I can like hear them and I can like see them all on the side, and you just feel so much less pressure because you're like, I'm not alone.
yeah,
It's just so weird how
yeah.
much like that makes such a big difference, and I think makes your performance so much better.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, what are some things that, you mentioned about your funeral colors, but what are some of the things that you've done or seen in your different environments that were really helpful about, for creating team? And maybe what are some of the things that you notice really undermines a sense of team and the value that it brings to a training?
Cool. So yeah, I've had heaps of different experiences with teams growing up. Obviously, there was kind of like the elite side of things, and then in college, I think when you're a little bit older, sorry, it's easier to sort of take more of that responsibility. So I found like in the college teams, it was like led by us. The coaches were there to do like the technical side of things, but we had, team captains, and we were the ones like motivating each other and leading the way rather than all of that coming from the coaches. I think in like the club setting, um, it's a little bit different just because I think we were younger and we didn't really feel as comfortable speaking up to coaches
Yeah,
like
sure.
you're kind of mentioning before. So we were really vocal, cheering each other on, and maybe helping someone out when they were having a tough time, or maybe the coach was like getting really on them that day, and
Yeah,
um, all of that sort of stuff. But I think what stuff that doesn't really help a team can be kind of what I was mentioning before about when someone's getting super competitive with other people, like explicitly.
yeah,
That is really bad for team chemistry. I think it's just the same as any other sports. Like you have to be close knit as a team, and like take away your sport, and you'll still be really good friends.
yeah. And I think you don't even have to necessarily be friends um, to contribute to a team dynamic in a really positive way, because it's not reasonable to expect that just because you've been grouped with a group of girls that you're going to love them.
No.
It's great when you do,
Yeah.
But I think it's a kind of a decision that you make, isn't it? That there's value in this, and I'm going to contribute to it.
Yeah, and it's just gonna make your life so much better and everyone else, around you. It's gonna make the job so much easier if you're all,
Yeah.
cheering each other on rather than trying to tear each other down.
Seems obvious,
Yeah, you
but
would
sadly
think.
it's not sometimes. Oh dear. One of the questions I've been asking people is, because I'm always quite interested in this, is what's the process that you went through to kind of get into that competitive space? So, did you have a routine or like a superstition or a process that you went through that got you in the zone? Talk us through that.
Yeah. I never really had like superstitions like I had to like wear certain socks or something before the competition. I think like a coach told me when I was younger that you have to earn your confidence like every day in the gym. It's not something that, can just be given to you. And so
Mm,
if I'd done everything in my power to prepare for a competition, then I can kind of like be at peace going into it, knowing like, oh, you did everything you could. So, if it goes great, that's awesome. If it doesn't, like there was nothing else I could have done to get ready for it. So I was usually pretty chill going into competitions,
mm.
if I'd done everything I could to get ready. And I think a lot of people use visualization, but I was terrible at visualizing. Like every time I tried to visualize, I would just like fall. So I could not visualize at all.
Yeah.
So instead I had like little pre-routine like rituals. So like before I went on vault, like I would like go through the motions of the vault and kind of like use my keywords. Same thing on like bar. I'd like obviously I can't visualize, so I'd maybe like kind of do my routine like with my hands or something, and then before beam I had like a little ritual of like where I'm putting my arms for each skill, and then I think like once you present to the judge, like all that I'm thinking about is the first skill, and
Mm,
then we will worry about the rest when we get there. So
yeah.
I don't think you can be standing in front of the apparatus. Obviously, it's a little bit different on vault, but when you're standing in front of the beam or bar, and you're like, okay, thinking about the whole routine doesn't really work. You just got to think about that first skill, and then worry about the rest when you get there.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Um, just a heads up, this meeting is going to time out 'cause I'm on the poor man's version of
No worries.
just dial back in.
Okay.
um, I like what you said about what was it? You earn your confidence in the gym. I think
Yeah.
that's a really, really good message to send young people, because really that's where you have control over the outcome, isn't it? You can't. So often you have these conversations with kids and parents leading up to an event, and they're trying to change things at the last minute and learn a skill in podium training. And
Oh,
this is crazy. Like, this is not the time to be putting additional pressure on yourself, but actually it's that, I guess, applying yourself um, daily in the gym to a high standard of training actually takes care of the outcome, more or less. Obviously, there's some other skills you need to learn, but I like how you use the word, it builds confidence. Um, because I think so often we kind of separate the mind from the body, in a sense, and sort of treat confidence as this mental skill that you need to develop. And I think to a degree you do. But actually, there's so much confidence that comes from reliably doing something over and over, right?
yeah, exactly. I think one of the main messages our coaches had in college was like high pressure practice, low pressure meet or competition.
Yeah.
Because if you're putting all that pressure on yourself in training, then when you get to the comp, you're like, I only got one routine. Like, how nice is this?
Yeah.
So good. So yeah, even just doing little things like for me, like just like presenting before, like doing a show routine, every time you're doing routines, make sure you like
Yeah.
show the first one and like physically make yourself just present, because you think that wouldn't really do that much, but like every time I presented, I was like, oh right, like this is serious. Whereas I think
Okay.
sometimes you can get into the like motion of just being like, oh, it's just another routine. Like
Yeah.
if I fall, I'll start again type thing. But
Yeah.
just like putting your arms up and being like, okay, this is the one that I'm going to show. Yeah, it builds all your confidence, and then by the time you get there, you'll be good to go.
Piece of cake, one routine. Okay, so last question. COVID. So it sucks. Auckland's still in lockdown. The rest of the country's in 3, so gymnasts can't do anything except boring Zoom sessions, which is really just pretend gymnastics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you have any advice that you might want to pass on to young gymnasts and how they can navigate? I guess because it's navigate both being in lockdown now, but also just the understanding that we could be in and out of lockdowns for a period of time, and that can do things to your confidence and enthusiasm, definitely. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, definitely it's rough. I think there's so many great resources out there, especially online. And I think it's a great time to work on like your strength and your flexibility. You can do lots of stuff at home to work on that. And there's heaps of stuff on social media or on YouTube. You could like if you're a girl, you could look for floor music. You can. There's so much stuff that you can be doing. But I think like stretching and strength is really great stuff that you can be doing from home, so that whenever you do get back into the gym, even though you might not know when that is, you'll be ready to go. And especially like there's so many strength things you can do at home that you're already doing at the gym, but it's fun to like have a look around and find stuff that mix it up a little bit, because you can get bored just doing like press to handstands every day.
Really?
Yeah, I don't like press handstands.
Press to handstands boring? No, surely not. Oh, hey, thank you so much for taking time to share your thoughts with us. It's always great to have you sharing your message and lending us your insights, because I think you've had experiences in gymnastics that are really broad. You've been in settings that are competitive and non-competitive, and in New Zealand and out of New Zealand, and I think that gives you a unique perspective. And I know that if anyone's lasted this long in the interview, they would definitely have benefited from it. So hey, I appreciate your time, Courtney.
No worries. Thanks for having me.